CBS Young and the Restless spoilers full episodes Monday, September 8, 2025. In Genoa City, the air was heavy with anticipation, for Victor Newman was once again preparing for war. The patriarch, who had waged countless battles against enemies both inside and outside his family, was not content to rest in the twilight of his power. His revelation about Audra had shaken him, but it also reignited something dangerous in his blood desire to dominate, to shape the destiny of those around him, to remind his children and rivals alike that the Newman name carried the weight of an empire. It was in this mood that he summoned his heirs, Nick, Adam, and Victoria, to a private meeting that bore all the gravitas of a war council. They knew from experience that when Victor called them together in such secrecy, it meant he was about to unveil a strategy that would alter the course of their lives. Nick arrived first, carrying the familiar mixture of respect and resentment that had long defined his relationship with his father. Adam followed, his sharp mind already calculating the angles, wondering how he might twist Victor's plans to his own advantage. Finally, Victoria entered, her composure polished, though her thoughts churned with the weight of recent revelations about her daughter Claire, her secret support for Kyle, and her uneasy role as both ally and adversary to her father. Together they formed a tableau of legacy, three children shaped by Victor's hand, each bound by blood, yet divided by ambition. When Victor began to speak, his voice carried the authority of a general commanding soldiers rather than a father addressing his offspring. He outlined his plan with precision, revealing not only his intent to undermine Kyle and Claire, but also his broader vision for consolidating Newman power across Genoa City. He spoke of alliances to be broken, enemies to be crushed, and loyalty to be tested. The plan was ruthless, but his children knew better than to expect anything else. Nick bristled, his conscience warring with his loyalty, while Adam's eyes gleamed with opportunity, and Victoria tried to mask the unease gnawing at her. For all their differences, none of them could deny the magnetism of their father's vision. Victor was not simply a man, he was an institution, and when he laid out his strategies, it was difficult not to be swept into his current. The war he promised would touch every family in Genoa City, not just the Newmans and the Abbotts, but the Chancellors, the Baldwins, and beyond. Meanwhile, another storm brewed elsewhere, far from the polished walls of Victor's council chamber. Cain Ashby, long known for his complicated entanglements, was growing increasingly furious with Phyllis Summers. Their interactions had always been fraught with tension, each seeing in the other a mirror of ambition, manipulation, and wounded pride. But now Cain found himself pushed to the edge, his patience tested by Phyllis's endless meddling. He had devised strategies of his own, bold moves meant to shake the foundations of Genoa City's business world, and he could not abide Phyllis inserting herself into his affairs. To him, she was not only a nuisance, but a threat, a woman too cunning to underestimate and too reckless to ignore. Phyllis, however, was undeterred by Cain's wrath. She thrived on pushing buttons, on prying into the secrets people wished to keep buried. It was in this spirit that she stumbled upon Michael Baldwin's latest development. Michael had received a call, an invitation that carried the promise of a new professional chapter. Alone, he left a message for Lauren, his voice tinged with both excitement and apprehension, explaining that he needed to discuss the opportunity with her. But before he could breathe, Phyllis appeared like a shadow, her curiosity sharpened to a blade. She pressed him for details, demanding to know who had extended this mysterious offer. Michael, weary of her constant intrusions, tried to deflect with humor, mocking her uncanny ability to eavesdrop and suggesting she still had not lost her talent for sticking her nose where it did not belong. But Phyllis was relentless. She guessed, she prodded, she theorized, each attempt narrowing the field until the truth began to crystallize. Michael grew impatient, warning her that she was wasting her time, that she would keep asking questions until time itself ran out. Still, she pressed, until finally her sharp mind landed on the truth. The offer had come from Cain. The revelation hit like a spark to dry tinder. Phyllis immediately recognized the implications. Cain needs a fixer, she declared, seeing in Michael the very tool Cain was trying to acquire. Michael, exasperated, reminded her that she had been distant with him for months, cold and unforgiving. He accused her of abandoning their friendship, of treating him with contempt while he continued to stand by his principles. Phyllis fired back, her voice laced with bitterness, accusing him of betrayal, of siding with Sharon Newman when she had needed him most. To her, his defense of Sharon had been the ultimate wound, proof that he valued others above the bond they had once shared. Michael countered with passion, insisting Sharon had been innocent, that his actions were never meant to hurt Phyllis, that he had been following his conscience rather than betraying her trust. The argument carried the weight of years of friendship fractured by suspicion and pride. Yet amid the anger, there was still a glimmer of longing. Michael admitted that he had never wanted to hurt her, that he still cherished the friendship they had shared, that he missed the closeness they once enjoyed. Phyllis, for all her sharp edges, felt the pang of those words, the tug of nostalgia for what had been lost. And so she dangled an offer of her own. If he revealed to her the truth about his new employer, if he admitted openly that he was working for Cain, she would wipe the slate clean. She would forgive him, erase the bitterness, and offer him the chance to restore what had been broken between them. It was a manipulative bargain, yet also a desperate plea for connection. For all her bravado, Phyllis longed to have Michael back in her corner, to know that even in her most reckless moments, she had someone who would stand by her. The entanglement of these storylines formed a tapestry of betrayal, loyalty, and shifting alliances that only the young and the restless could weave. Victor, plotting a war with the help of his children, sought to control the fate of everyone around him, even as he grappled with the shocking revelation of Audra as his daughter. Cain, burning with fury, prepared to strike at those who stood in his way. Phyllis, ever restless, poked at secrets until she uncovered truths that could unravel fragile alliances. And Michael, torn between conscience and opportunity, stood at a crossroads where every choice threatened to cost him a piece of his soul. The stage was set for yet another battle in Genoa City, one that would pit family against family, friend against friend, and loyalty against ambition. The war Victor promised was no longer confined to the boardroom. It spread through the veins of the city itself, infecting every relationship, every fragile bond, until all that remained was the certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. At Newman Towers, the tension was palpable as Adam, Nick, and Victoria gathered in their father's office, summoned by the same urgency that always signaled war. Victor Newman stood at the head of the room, the embodiment of control, his sharp eyes flicking from one child to the next as if gauging their readiness for battle. For years, his children had struggled under the weight of his expectations, sometimes resisting, sometimes surrendering, but always orbiting around the gravity of his will. Today was no different. They knew from the moment he called them that their father was about to drag them into another campaign that would ripple through every family and business in Genoa City. Nick was the first to break the silence, his voice weary but edged with suspicion. He asked the question that was already circling all their minds. Were they about to go to war with Cain Ashby, or had the war already begun? His words carried the fatigue of a man who had seen too many battles, too many lines blurred between family loyalty and moral compromise. Adam, leaning back with that trademark smirk that always masked his deeper calculations, added fuel to the fire, pointing out that perhaps they were already knee-deep in this conflict whether they liked it or not. Victor listened, his expression unreadable, before finally revealing the truth. He told them that Cain's company had developed an artificial intelligence program of staggering potential, a tool so powerful it could destabilize entire industries, topple competitors, even cause havoc on a global scale if placed in the wrong hands. His voice dropped into that cold, decisive tone that left no room for debate. Cain Ashby, he declared, must be stopped. The words were not a suggestion or a plea. They were an edict. His children knew that when Victor Newman set his mind to destroying someone, there was no escape. Victoria, always the pragmatist, pressed him for specifics. How exactly did he intend to stop Cain? Victor leaned forward, his gaze burning with satisfaction as he revealed the ace he held. Through information Nick had gathered during his own recent ordeal, pieces of intelligence smuggled back while in captivity, Victor had discovered proof of a scandal buried deep in Cain's family history. Cain's father, long gone, but not forgotten, had swindled Madame D. Lyon out of her fortune in a con so brutal it left her life in ruins. The evidence, Victor explained, could be used to weave a devastating portrait of Cain Ashby, not just as a ruthless businessman, but as the son of a conman, a legacy of deceit and theft. Adam's eyes lit up at the thought, his penchant for darker solutions surfacing immediately. He proposed that if they pushed Cain hard enough, if they tortured him figuratively through public scandal, and relentless pressure, he would eventually crack and hand over his prized AI. Adam's suggestion was brutal, and it revealed the sharp divide between him and his siblings. Nick frowned, disgust clear in his eyes, while Victoria shifted uneasily, her mind caught between her loyalty to the company and her own moral compass. She asked the question that lingered in the shadows of the room. What would Victor do if he actually acquired Cain's AI program? What would happen once such a dangerous tool belonged to him? Victor's answer was as chilling as it was calculating. He explained that he had many options, his tone deliberately vague, but the implication was clear would wield it as he saw fit, as a weapon, as leverage, as a means of ensuring Newman's dominance over every competitor. To Nick and Victoria, the idea was deeply unsettling, a descent into the kind of ruthless immorality they had always feared in their father. They protested, questioning whether this strategy was ethical, whether the pursuit of power at such a cost would corrode what little humanity Newman Enterprises still claimed to hold. Adam, however, remained silent, calculating the opportunities such a weapon could present for him personally. Before the debate could intensify, the door opened, and Michael Baldwin entered, his presence slicing through the tension like a blade. The timing was no coincidence. Mitchell never arrived without a purpose. His expression was composed, but his eyes revealed the storm brewing beneath. Victor dismissed his children shortly after, telling them they had heard enough for now. As they filed out, they cast wary glances at Michael, knowing that whatever business he had with their father could only complicate matters further. When the room was empty, except for the two men, Victor fixed his gaze on Michael with cold precision. He made it clear that if Michael had come to ask for his old position back, he should abandon the thought immediately. There was no returning to the past, no reclaiming what had already been lost. But Michael, never one to grovel, met Victor's challenge with a revelation of his own. He admitted he had already received a better offer only from Cain Ashby himself. The words carried a deliberate weight, testing Victor's reaction. Victor was not surprised. In fact, he seemed almost amused. With a low chuckle, he remarked that Cain's invitation to Michael and Lorne to come to Nice made perfect sense now. Cain was attempting to buy loyalty, to position Michael as his fixer, his legal shield, his strategist in a coming war. Victor had seen the move before it was even made, for no rival ever surprised him for long. What followed was a dance of strategy and manipulation that only two men like Victor and Michael could perform. Victor, amused yet intrigued, asked what Michael truly wanted. Michael, seizing the moment, offered a daring proposition. He would accept Cain's job, take the offer, and step into the role Cain needed him to play. But in truth, he would not be working for Cain. He would be working for Victor. He would feed Victor the information, manipulate Cain's trust, and serve as Newman's eyes and ears in the heart of his rival's empire. It would not only be Victor's weapon against Cain, but also Michael's path to redemption, his penance for past betrayals, his way of earning his place back in Victor's good graces. Victor's eyes narrowed, studying Michael with the precision of a predator sizing up prey. He did not speak immediately, letting the silence stretch, letting the weight of the proposition hang in the air. Then, slowly, he smiled. It was the kind of smile that never reached his eyes, the kind of smile that meant danger was unfolding. He admitted that he had suspected Michael would come with such a proposal, that he had seen the desire for redemption written in his face long before the words were spoken. He told Michael that if he was truly committed, if he was willing to play the double agent, then the path back to Newman lay open. And so, in that office, a new pact was formed. Michael Baldwin would become Victor Newman's inside man, a spy embedded in Cain Ashby's camp, a man living a double life in a world where trust was already a fragile illusion. To the world, it would appear that Michael had chosen Cain's side, betraying Victor for money and opportunity. But behind the curtain, he would be feeding Victor every detail, every weakness, every secret Cain tried to conceal. It was a dangerous game, one that could destroy Michael if discovered, but it was also the kind of game he had always excelled at: high risk, high stakes. Balanced on the knife's edge between triumph and ruin, Victor leaned back in his chair, satisfied. His children would continue to question his morality, and Cain would continue to believe he held the upper hand. But Victor knew better. With Michael embedded as his agent, with scandal ready to expose Cain's family legacy, and with the AI software dangling like bait in the water, Victor had set the pieces in motion for yet another ruthless conquest. In Genoa City, the war was already underway, and once again, Victor Newman stood at the center of it, pulling every string, moving every pawn, prepared to remind the world that his empire was eternal. Would you like me to continue this arc into Cain's point of view, how he reacts to Michael's presence in his camp, and how Phyllis might exploit this secret arrangement to cause chaos between them all? At Newman Towers, the aftershocks of Victor's war council rippled through the three siblings he had summoned. Nick, Victoria, and Adam lingered in uneasy silence, the echoes of their father's plan pressing heavily on them. None of them could dismiss the gravity of what had just been laid before them, notion of weaponizing Cain Ashby's AI software to undermine competitors, destabilize industries, and carve out a new era of Newman dominance. Yet for Nick and Victoria, the moral cost was too much to ignore. Nick paced with restless energy, running his hands through his hair, asking whether they had become so hardened that they could even contemplate destroying livelihoods for profit. Victoria, though often pragmatic in business, admitted her discomfort, pointing out that their father's vision felt less like strategy and more like tyranny. Adam, however, smirked at their hesitation, his cynicism rising to the surface as he reminded them that Newman was never built on virtue but on power. He told them coldly that whether they liked it or not, the decision ultimately rested with their father, not with them, and that Newman would gain a head start in this ruthless new world of AI whether they wrung their hands over ethics or not. The words cut through the room with the bluntness of a knife, leaving Nick fuming and Victoria visibly unsettled. The argument was circular, weary, and unsatisfying, the kind of debate they had lived through countless times before, where moral qualms collided with Victor's iron will, and where their own voices ultimately meant little. While the Newman children argued over principles and power, Cain Ashby's world was spinning in a different direction. In the quiet of Chancellor Park, under the dappled shade of trees that had borne witness to countless confessions and confrontations, Lily Winters faced Cain with a mixture of vulnerability and guarded resolve. She told him that the video he had made, the one he had thought would be just another plea, had moved her to tears. For a fleeting moment, she had glimpsed the man she once loved, the man who had been her partner, the father of her children, the man she thought she had lost forever. The honesty in her admission stung Cain deeply, for it was both a gift and a reminder of how far he had fallen. His immediate question was whether their children had seen it, whether they too had felt even a spark of recognition in the father they had distanced themselves from. Lily could not answer, her voice low with uncertainty, confessing that she didn't know, but she reminded him, with a sharp edge, that no matter what they saw, the damage he had inflicted on them and on her still lingered. Love could not erase betrayal, and sentiment could not undo years of pain. Cain tried to counter with a promise, telling her that he had canceled all of his business plans in Genoa City, that he had abandoned the strategies and ambitions that had once consumed him, all in the hope of making amends. But Lily, scarred by years of disappointment, did not melt so easily. She warned him not to expect excitement or instant forgiveness, that too much had happened for her to place blind faith in his words. She had learned the hard way that Cain's promises, however heartfelt, often dissolved into manipulations. A part of her feared this newfound contrition was just another mask, another ploy in a lifetime of games. She told him bluntly that if he wanted her trust, he needed to give her answers, real answers knit from outsiders, not from figures like Aristotle Dumas whispering in shadows, but from his own lips. She demanded truth, raw and unfiltered, as the only possible foundation for rebuilding anything between them. But just as the moment hung heavy with possibility, it was shattered by the arrival of Phyllis Summers. She strode into the park with her usual fiery confidence, inserting herself into Cain's world with the ease of someone who knew she could provoke chaos simply by being present. She announced that she was there to discuss the latest developments at Arabesque, as though business could excuse her intrusion into something so personal. Cain, his frustration boiling, snapped that he had already told her everything between them was finished, that whatever tangled connection they had once shared was over. But Phyllis, never one to accept dismissal, countered with her own interpretation. She insisted that nothing had ended, that the story was merely on pause, waiting for her to step back into it at the right time. Her words dripped with insinuation, as though she knew Cain better than he knew himself, as though she alone could see the inevitability of their continued entanglement. For Lily, the intrusion was unbearable. already struggling to balance the flicker of hope with the weight of betrayal. She now watched as Phyllis casually dismantled the fragile progress she and Cain might have made. Her patience snapped, and her voice rang with anger as she declared that she had seen and heard enough. She walked away before Cain could stop her, her steps heavy with finality. Cain, panicked, turned to Phyllis and pleaded for a moment to smooth things over, to explain himself, but Lily was gone before he could take a single step. Left behind, Cain rounded on Phyllis, demanding to know what she thought she was doing. His fury was raw, fueled not only by the loss of Lily in that moment, but also by the gnawing fear that perhaps Phyllis was right, that Lily was already gone, that no words or videos or promises could bring her back. Phyllis, unflinching, met his rage with icy calm. She told him that while he might cling to the fantasy that his bond with Lily still had life in it, Lily herself had already decided. For her, it was over, and Cain was the only one refusing to see it. Phyllis claimed she was only speaking the truth he was too cowardly to admit. But Cain, his jaw tight and his voice like steel, ordered her never to speak of his private life again. His personal relationships were not her battlefield, not her playground, and he made it clear that if she crossed that line again, there would be consequences. His warning was sharp, his meaning unmistakable, and though Phyllis smirked as though unfazed, a flicker of tension passed through her eyes. For all her bravado, she knew Cain's fury was not to be underestimated. He was a man on the brink, torn between the hope of redemption and the reality of his failures, and men in such places could be as dangerous as they were desperate. As the day drew to a close, the storylines of Newman, Ashby, Baldwin, and Summers intertwined like threads in an ever-tightening knot. At Newman Towers, the siblings debated ethics, but knew their father's word was final, their own consciences powerless against the juggernaut of Victor's ambition. In Chancellor Park, Lily and Cain's fragile attempt at reconciliation crumbled under the weight of Phyllis's intrusion, leaving both wounded and uncertain of what the future could hold. And Phyllis herself, relentless as ever, pressed forward, entangling herself in conflicts, both personal and professional. Too stubborn to realize that her meddling might be pushing those around her into corners they could not escape. The future loomed heavy over Genoa City, filled with questions that refused to settle. Would Newman Enterprises weaponize Cain's AI and plunge into a new era of ruthless warfare? Would Lily ever allow herself to trust Cain again? Or had Phyllis's intrusion closed that door forever? And would Cain's fury, once bottled, explode in ways that would change the course of all their lives? In a world where love, betrayal, and ambition collided endlessly, there were no easy answers, only the certainty that tomorrow would bring another battle, another revelation, another chance for everything to be torn apart again.